Hello, everyone, and welcome to Paths to Parenthood Stories of Love and Growth. My name is Christina Schultz, and I'm a 42-year-old mama to two kids by adoption and two dogs. I'm a wife and a pharmacist. I live in Missouri, and I'm going on 17 years post double lung transplant. I will be moderating our session today and introducing our speakers in just a moment. But before I do want to get to a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded. It will be available after the event on the CF Foundation YouTube channel. This will be notified by an email when the session is available. We will be taking audience questions during this session, and we would encourage you to submit your questions at any time in the chat box. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible. And before we begin, I do want to remind everyone of our event conduct guidelines. Please be considerate, open-minded, and respectful. We ask you do not have any malicious or offensive speech, and do not ask for any medical advice either. If you feel the event contact guidelines were violated, please contact a CF Foundation staff member in the help desk. And we also have counselors on call today. So if at any point you feel overwhelmed by this conversation, you can visit the help desk and request to connect to a counselor. So now let's get started. I would first like to introduce our first speaker, Dominic.
Hey everyone, I'm coming to you from bed because very fittingly my son gave me the flu yesterday. So please I apologize for my appearance, but we can still have a good time, right? So my name is Dominic Quagliozzi. I'm 42 years old. I'm married to my wife Deborah, and I have a 5-year-old son who we conceived through IVF. I currently live in Massachusetts, and I'm a visual artist as well as an arts educator. I am 10 years post double lung transplant, and that eventually led to me having diabetes, cataracts, and osteoporosis. I have double delta 508, and I think I have had a pretty typical experience with cystic fibrosis in that I've had a lot of lung infections, a lot of pneumonias growing up, a lot of hemoptysis, and then that led to me needing a double lung transplant by the time I was in my late 20s. I was listed for 3 years, and I eventually had my transplant when I was 32 years old. I have a master's degree in fine arts. I played sports growing up. I played baseball. I ran cross country. I played hockey. And so then when I met my wife, we talked about the idea of having kids. We discussed possibly not having kids. We discussed adoption, and we discussed IVF, which we eventually went for and succeeded at, although it was a very long journey. So we'll talk about that more as the thing goes on, and thank you for having me.
Thank you so much, Dominic. And next, I'd like to introduce Lauren, our next speaker.
Hi, y'all. I'm Lauren. I'm 31, and I live in Texas with my husband of five years. We've been married for 5 years. It's crazy. It went so fast. And our 18-month-old daughter, including our two dogs, our two fur children. My husband and I have been together for about 13 years, married for 5. And when we first got together, we knew we wanted to be parents at some point. But at the advisement of my CF team, we were told to be cautious and that it either may take a while. There are concerns about health at that point for being postpartum and also just having a little one in the house, as Dominic can attest to right now. There's a lot of illness and a lot of germs there. So there was some advisement from them, some caution to just kind of think through before we started to have those conversations to actually have a family. Enter Trikafta in 2019, and my health started to restabilize after having a few years there where things were a little touch and go. I would get sick, and then I would get better, and then I would hit a roadblock where I would get sick again, and we didn't really know if being parents at that point was reasonable. We were actually convincing ourselves that we didn't want to have children because we didn't want to break our own hearts in case it was something that wasn't going to happen for us. So like I said, enter Trikafta, and my health stabilized. And about 3 years later, after my health was stable for that time period, we went ahead and started trying to have a family. And thankfully, the first month we tried, we were successful. And so my daughter was born in 2023, and she is such an incredible little spirit and little spitfire. We cannot imagine our lives without her. So here to share my story.
Thank you, Lauren. And last but not least, I'd like to introduce Mimi.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mimi. So a little bit about me. I'm 37, and I've been married to my husband, Andy, for 14 years. I'm a mom through adoption and foster care. So my kids, Abel is 9, and my daughter, Adriana, is 6. I was diagnosed with CF at birth. Where my Delta 508's at, you guys. I can't see any of you, but I hope that got y'all going. But I was diagnosed because of a Meconium ileus, and I'm a Montana girl, but I moved to Colorado after college, University of Montana grad here, to be closer to the adult CF Center at National Jewish in Denver. They're amazing. That's where I still am. I've got lots of the extra CF diseases like diabetes, asthma, arthritis, osteopenia, allergic bronchopulmonary aspergillosis, cancers, and GERD. You know, all the fun bonus gifts of CF, right? Also, because of high steroid use as a kid, my growth was stunted. So I am 4 feet 10 inches. So I'm technically a proportional dwarf as well. Yeah, a real goddamn inspirational story, as you might say. I'm also a stand-up comedian. So last year I got to tour with a group called Moms Unhinged. And currently this year I'm taking my own show, Parenthood Punchlines, on the road. So do reach out. But I've really taken everything I know about disability, chronic illness, transracial adoption, millennial parenting, marriage, and grief, and tried to find a way to make you, the audience, laugh with me, mostly because I also have ADHD and anxiety too. Pretty good stuff. But I'm super excited to be here at BreatheCon and excited for your questions and to share my story. So thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you so much, Mimi. Okay, so to get everything up started, we're going to ask the panel here some questions. And first, I'm going to ask everybody, what did the conversations look like with your CF doctors around becoming parents? Did they give all recommendations based on your health? And what did that conversation look like also with your spouse? Dominic, you want to go first?
Yeah. So when I was first starting to think about, having kids or the possibility of having kids, I was still being seen at a children's center at Children's Hospital Boston. And so it wasn't really brought up then. I don't think they really had the resources, but over the next few years, so from the ages of 18 to 22, I was part of the first adult cohort to transition from the pediatric CF center to an adult center. That was Children's Hospital Boston transitioning to Brigham and Women's in Boston. And so once I made that transition, they started bringing up issues of, recommending maybe seeing a urologist if I ever thought I wanted to have kids. And they mentioned in early adults with men with CF know that there's a 97% infertility rate because of issues with vas deferens. So that's when I kind of started talking about those. I actually hadn't met my wife yet. So to me, it was just kind of like, no, it was in the distance. And then as I met her and we started chatting, then that's when I started asking my center, can I do like a semen analysis to see if I am infertile or whatever? And so that's kind of, for me, that's where it started. And then it wasn't until probably, 6 years later that I really started having serious conversations about that with my CF team. Then I was listed for transplant with the transplant team and the referral to a urologist.
Okay. Lauren, how was your experience?
Yeah, so like I shared in my intro, it was a little bit of an interesting conversation to start. So there was more of the abstract initial, so what could this look like? Whenever we weren't exactly ready to start trying to be parents or enter that realm, but to prepare for it. And that really was just like looking at my health overall, like, again, talking about what does life as a parent with CF look like. But whenever we started to actually go down that route, about, I'd say, a year to 6 months before we actually were going to start trying, I spoke with my team and I basically said, where do you land me right now as far as my health? And are there any concerns? Are there any like yield signs that I need to be looking out for? So I saw my CF team and did like a general workup there. And then also met with the MFM team at the hospital that my pulmonologist is connected to, so that they could have communication, just to kind of prepare ahead of time. I didn't know what CF in pregnancy necessarily looked like, especially in the world of Trikafta, since it's so new. So I wanted to know, what can I expect? And turns out with pregnancy in general, you really can't expect much of anything. Things change and happen so quickly. But a lot of what the conversation was beforehand was just looking at my health as a whole. What have my liver function levels looked like? What have my blood sugars looked like? What have my lung function looked like over the last year and a half? And is there anything that would be more of a watchful component that we'd have to keep an eye on? As far as the conversation with my husband, it was an exciting conversation we didn't always think we'd be able to have, but I mean, his viewpoint and mine as well is just whatever's going to keep me the healthiest. And, if it was deemed that it would be something that was too dangerous to do, then we would find another route. But it really was just like a common ground between both of us. Like, let's just see what this looks like.
Mm-hmm. Mimi, what do you think?
So my CF team were super supportive as far as like, you go ahead and do what you want. But if you all heard how much Lauren did and how much Dominic did, I think everyone knew that I was not going to follow through with any of those tests or any preparation. And so adoption was really a much better route for us. And really, I think one of the funny things about CF is like, we have it and we think it's our whole lives, right? I mean, it's my whole body is CF, but when you go to the care team and you're like, hey, do you want to talk about me having a baby? They're like, we're not really dealing with that area. No one wants to look at that part of you right now. So then finding somebody, like finding an OBGYN or someone who wants to, be on the same team, it's a lot of coordination, and I did not have that in me at all. So they were just supportive of like, hey, we will help you out with whatever direction you go and when you get there, which was awesome.
That's great. Okay, my next question is going to be specifically for Dominic. Dominic, what led to your decision to complete the sperm extraction prior to your transplant? And was this a recommendation from one of your medical teams?
Yeah, it was my transplant team. I was pre-transplant I was double listed at Stanford and at USC in Los Angeles. And they both kind of mentioned the unknown effects of the anti-rejection meds on sperm, like the Prograf specifically and Celsep. And so they said that, there's not enough research. They don't know how toxic it is. They don't know if it can cause birth defects. So their recommendation was to meet with a urologist, like I mentioned previous conversation about pre-transplant, have the sperm extracted, and then I would keep them frozen in a biobank. And then once transplant occurred, we could decide whether or not we wanted to move forward with IVF. So at the time, my wife and I both thought that was a good idea, because we felt like taking the variables out of the situation, as many variables out as possible. And also, so I knew that I was infertile, and it's not a guarantee that when they go in, they do what's called a TESE. It's TESE, a testicular sperm extraction, where they numb you and then they basically make an incision in one of your testicles and go in and like scoop out like a pomegranate, so it was pretty gnarly.
Ouch.
So it's still not a guarantee that there's going to be viable sperm once they do that. So we wanted to do the sperm extraction pre-transplant for two reasons. One, to see if the sperm would be safer that way, and two, to see if they had viable sperm. Because if there wasn't, then we knew our only choice would be for adoption or like a sperm donor or something like that. So, so I had that, and I had viable sperm, and we froze those. And once I was stable after my transplant, it ended up being about 5 years, we moved forward with my wife's portion of the IVF. And so, yeah.
So you, so next question to follow up with that was, you knew that you wanted to pursue this, or did you ever think about pursuing and talking about the IVF and adoption or fostering? And did your wife want to do any of that?
Yeah, we both kind of dreamed about having biological kids of our own. When we first met, I met my wife. She was having a cervical cancer scare. She had undergone tests, and I met her like literally the day after. And so we had this thing where she was, I was like, what's going on in your life? And she's like, well, I've been having some medical procedures. And I was like, oh, that's awesome, because I have cystic fibrosis. So like we had this like really dark humor about the fact that we might not even be able to have kids either way. So we started to talk about adoption pretty early, but thankfully her cervical cancer test came back negative. And so that's when we kind of start to say like, okay, if it becomes a possibility in the future, both medically and financially, I think we want to try to do that. So that's kind of how that whole thing came about. And then the step after that was for my wife to have genetic testing to see if she was a carrier of CF. Because also we discussed if she was a carrier, that would raise the likelihood of us giving birth to a CF child. And thankfully, she's not a carrier, so we didn't have to encounter that dilemma. But that's something that we thought really long and hard about. If she was a carrier, would we still proceed? We weren't quite sure.
So switching gears, Mimi, let's talk about the adoption process a little bit. I know you have a very unusual story about it. So can you talk about that process or lack thereof to adopt your son?
Yeah. So my husband and I were very quick to decide adoption and foster care as far as the route that we wanted to take to become parents. It was right. We kind of went into wanting to have kids right around Trikafta time. And I kept seeing all these people get pregnant from Trikafta. And I was like, oh no. Well, not from Trikafta, but like, after taking Trikafta, it happened quickly. And I was like, oh crap, I think we got to figure this out. And so we started down the adoption process route, and we went with an adoption consultant. So we didn't apply at a specific, didn't go with a specific agency. So we did all the steps that you take, which is you have to do your home study, you have to do a family profile, getting your financials in order, all the things. Luckily, I have a type A husband. But during this time, our neighbor knew, because I'm pretty vocal, that we were in the adoption process, and came over one day and knocked on our door and said, hey, my husband's coworker is in a crisis pregnancy situation. I talked to them about you. They said you can call. So, here's their number, and handed me a Post-it note with the phone number. And I went ahead and made the most awkward phone call of my life, which is like, hi, I heard you have a baby. I want a baby. It's terrible. It's terrible. But we really got to know her because of this. And we met at Panera every Sunday, got to meet her, got to talk to her about, her life and her experience, and tell her about our life. And because of that, disclosed the cystic fibrosis and the diabetes. And, that is, luckily she kind of used humor to deal with her pain too. So we really got along great. And she asked us to be our son's parents in January 19th, 2015. And then he was born in March. And so I got to be in the delivery room with her, holding up the leg. I've seen it, guys. This body didn't want to do that. No, thank you. No, thank you. But blessings to all of you who choose that direction for your life. So that was our son's adoption process. And then with our daughter, we became foster parents and went that direction, just seeing all the different ways and reasons why people end up choosing adoption, whether that's on the bio side or on the parenting side of it. It just it made us just jump in more. And so love to talk about that story, because I think that just like with CF, every person's journey is so different. And I think sharing those stories kind of helps you kind of put yourself into it for a minute too. So yeah.
Definitely. So switching to Lauren, what was CF care like for you while you were pregnant? That's definitely something I think several people would like to know about.
Yeah, it wasn't much different than typical CF care. So typically we see our doctors quarterly, about every 3 months or so. So they basically just wanted to see me every trimester, which is about every 3 months if we do our math, if we go back to math class. So I did go in to see them. I did PFTs. Typically my OB or MFM would have me do blood work pretty often. So if there was any additional labs my doctor needed, which they didn't really take much else, they're like, your doctor's got everything covered pretty much. They would just tack it on and I would do it at my next appointment. Something that was a little bit different though was that I was part of the Mayflower study, still am technically until my daughter is 2. And so they would want me to get some liver labs done and some other labs as well, just kind of throughout the process. So we would just kind of throw that on there. I had so many bruises from lab draws. It was insane. Pretty much every appointment that I went to for my MFM, which was about every month or so, more frequent as I got further along, they would do labs. So I was just like a little pinfish and it was great. But yeah, as far as my CF care, it wasn't much different. I always had my team on my chart if I had any questions. But for the most part, they'd be like, ask your MFM, because like Mimi was saying, they kind of don't want to touch that whole world. They mainly were there if there was any issues with antibiotics or medications I was taking. But we had pretty much covered all that before I got pregnant anyway, so it wasn't necessarily needed.
So this next question is for both of you, Dominic and Lauren. How did you both prepare for the postpartum period in relation to also everyday CF care? Because that can be a very tough time. So how does that work for you? Dominic, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, so I was post-transplant, so I didn't have the, like the vest and the nebulizers to contend with. But I really think that living a whole life with CF really prepared me for postpartum, because I was used to bringing I'm 42. I was part of the study for the first vest in the mid 90s, and when I went to college in 2000, the vest was like 50 pounds, and so I brought that to and from college every time I left the dorm to go home for break and stuff. And then later on, I was on oxygen. I was in a wheelchair. I had a feeding tube while I was preparing for transplant. So anytime I wanted to travel, I had to bring all that stuff with me. So to me, that was just like a perfect preparation to, bring the baby carriage and the car seat and the bottle. So I did most of the night stuff for my wife to kind of give her a break. I did bottle feeds. I did the changing diapers overnight, all that kind of stuff to try to ease her burden. And that's kind of a lifestyle that we've already been living, right? Like getting up at night to I don't know about any other men with CF in here, but I still pee like 4 or 5 times a night. So I was getting up anyways, and it was just like I go pee and then I go change the diaper and try to go back to bed for like another hour or two, so for sure. But I think I had a lot of preparation because of living with CF. And then with the transplant, I didn't have those necessarily like the daily routine. So it was actually pretty nice for me. I was able to, you know, do that for my wife. I don't know, with CF, if I had my CF lungs, I probably would have been too worn down and too, I mean, I was in the hospital 5 or 6 times a year pre-transplant. So, you know, I'm pretty thankful the way that we set up things and the way it turned out to be able to do that.
Lauren,
And
what
I'll
was your
say,
experience?
yeah, Dominic, you saying like you have to get up several times a night. That sounds like me in my 3rd trimester. Like it was like every 30 minutes. So definitely can attest to that. Very similar to what you and your wife did. My husband took the night shift. We typically, in the very, very early days, I'm talking like newborn, just got home from the hospital, still trying to figure out what day it is, days. We took 6 to 8 hour shifts. He would typically take the night, I would take the day, and then we would kind of share the afternoon, and then I would take until like 10 o'clock at night. Part of that decision was because I did have a C-section. I was essentially unable to help a lot for the first like 8 weeks that my daughter was home. I was still recovering myself. The mobility wasn't really there. So he did a lot of the care during that time. I equated it to like the IV schedule, right? Whenever we're on home IVs, having to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning and do your IVs, except for instead of like hooking up a gravity ball, it's like taking care of a human being. So it's a little bit different, but it definitely brought us back to those days of like teamwork, which was like, we always say teamwork makes the dream work, right? Like teamwork makes the child survive during those days. And that was really helpful. I think another thing that helped was like I already knew how to sterilize stuff, you know, from all my days of neb use. So we already had the baby bottle sterilizer. We got to save some money there. So we were already in a routine of like, okay, this is dirty. We know how to wash it, how to clean it, how to prep it, whatever it is. So CF Life definitely helped in that way. But yeah, having a good support team, prepping as much as you can ahead of time, frozen meals in the freezer, having a meal train set up if you can, having select people to call on if you really need help, was really what kind of helped us get through the newborn stage.
And real quick, Lauren, there's a question directly about this did you do the Trikafta before and during the pregnancy? And if you did, was that a team decision? Your CF care team make that? Were you on board with that, or any questions, concerns with that?
Yeah, so I was on Trikafta the entire pregnancy. I had been on Trikafta since 2019 and again got pregnant in 2023. So I had been on it for like 3 or 4-ish years at that point and had seen the positive impact it had on my health. So I wasn't about to give it up. Thankfully, by that point, my team and the research that they've done from 2019 to 2023, there was a little bit known about Trikafta in pregnancy, so we were able to make the decision to stay on it. We didn't feel like the risks of my health deteriorating was worth coming off. So I stayed on it the entire pregnancy. They did, again, like I said, check the liver levels as part of the study, but then also for my doctors as well, just to check and make sure that was doing okay. And then lung function too. So we did keep a close eye on it. It was a conversation that we had. And I think if I hadn't had such a positive increase in my health prior to being pregnant and being on Trikafta, it probably would have been a little bit of a different conversation. So definitely encourage folks who are on Trikafta or any of the modulators, including this new one that's coming out, talk with your doctor, see what they say. And ultimately it is your decision, but make sure that you do have that conversation with them.
Mimi, our next question will be more about the fostering and adoption process. So when you were going through that process, was your CF a big consideration to the private? I know you said you had that private individual and or the agencies. What was something you didn't expect also from this process?
Yeah, so with our son, I disclosed my CF and diabetes with his bio mom because I honestly just didn't feel right not disclosing it. And it was definitely a consideration for her for sure. And I got the standard, well, are you going to die? And, I'm like, yes, at some point I will, as will this baby, which hopefully not right away in my care. Okay. I can only do so much. But my goal is not to die. And because of like the amazing research that we have right now, it's a real possibility that I'm going to be able to make it through this kid's life. But when you're already at the adoption process, you're working with someone who knows that life is complicated and has lots of different twists and turns in it. And we really can't predict anything. So we're going to do our best. And then with our daughter, we went through the foster care certification process, through our county. And at foster care and being in that world, it's different county to county, state to state. But they were not going to certify us because of our health or because of my health, I thought. So one piece of feedback I received from the director was like, we're removing these kids from trauma. If you die on them, that's really traumatic. We can't have that happening. And honestly, I received that with like, yeah, makes sense. I mean, nobody would, that's not the goal that I want to have happen either. But on the day that our packet was going in front of the board, our whole home study to see if we would be certified to become foster parents, I received a call, and it was the director, and she was like, hey, we have talked to the doctor. I was like, I think that's a HIPAA violation, but okay, good job. Do your due diligence. But she was like, no, we've talked to the doctor, and it sounds like she can come home today. And I was just like, what? And she, went on to say, there's actually a baby in NICU and that needs a foster family. And I said, well, we're not certified. And she said, well, I guess if you say yes, you are. And so that situation, that process, that actually was our daughter, Adriana. And I think I love a good moral to the story, but I think the moral is sometimes the biggest obstacle with becoming a parent, with doing anything with a disability, is hearing that your disability is going to be an issue. But really, we don't get to know what the other issues are that other people are dealing with. And in our case, the county needed families more than they needed perfectly healthy families. And we were able to step in and become foster parents and then adoptive parents to our daughter. And we've fostered, in the process, we've had one other kiddo live with us, and we've gotten to be respite parents for other foster parents who, will need a week or something like that, and have kiddos stay with us. So I find that having CF and a disability in general just makes people more comfortable with their baggage. It's like, come on, drop it off. We all got something.
For sure. For sure. My next question is for everybody. And I think that even as parents, anybody can feel this and understand this. But when you have a chronic illness such as us, it can be even more, I think the mom and dad guilt gets on heavy. Can you all talk about that guilt around having kids as a person with a chronic and life-threatening illness? Dominic, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that I consider often, especially, I was near death, 3 or 4 times, and then had a life-saving lung transplant. So, and then, to go and then have kids after a transplant, when the survival rates are, after 3 years, they're, 60% after 5 years. It's like a coin flip every day. So it's something I think about often, and I was always telling myself, at what age do I have to get my son to so he'll remember me, right? So 5 or 6 years old, and he just turned 5. So I kind of pat myself on the back. I got about a year left before, so he can remember me for the rest of his life. So, but really, it's just kind of about giving him the tools and the love to be able to do whatever he wants in life, regardless if I'm here or not. And I think just living in the moment and loving the moment with him, it really conquers that kind of like what I call like future grief, like something that hasn't happened yet, but it's something that I anticipate to be there. But living and loving in the moment with him, I realize the guilt is actually not really productive, and you can use it to prepare him, but ultimately, he'll have a life of his own, and whether I'm here or not, something that it's just going to turn out the way it is. And so we spend a lot of time together. We do a lot of fun things together, and I try not to let him see any of that. Like, every once in a while I tear up. Like he played t-ball this past fall, and he gets his first hit, and I'm tearing up, and he's like, "Why?" Well, he's like, "Why are you crying?" So yeah, so it's that kind of thing. It's hard, but it's something that my wife and I wanted to do, and I think so far it's been working out pretty well, minus the flu that I have right now.
Lauren, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely, Dominic. Thank you for sharing that. That's such a big piece of your story and your experience. I'll shift gears here and say, like, there was definitely some guilt about, prior to getting pregnant, we were advised to get genetic testing done to see if my husband was a carrier, among just doing general genetic testing for him and for myself, just in case there was anything else underlying that we had no clue about. And so there was definitely a feeling of like, man, if it wasn't for me, he wouldn't have to do that. He wouldn't have to do that extensive genetic testing. And thank God it was just like a saliva swab. It wasn't anything too invasive. But then you also start to think, if he is a carrier, what are we going to do? And what does that look like? There is, of course, like IVF that Dominic, you and your wife did, and that doesn't come at a short, small cost either. So there is that component. So it definitely was something that we had to think about from the very beginning about whether this is something that we want to pursue, and pending what the results are, what would we choose to do? Thankfully, my daughter is only a carrier. We found out my husband is not a carrier, but there were definitely moments where I was doubting that and doubting, did we potentially miss something? Is the genetic testing all inclusive? Sure, they know about a lot more genes now, but are they all there? Could we potentially miss something? So I'll just throw on that. There's a whole nother level of guilt there when it comes to conceiving naturally.
For sure. Mimi, what are your thoughts on that?
I've got no guilt. F them kids. Seriously, no. I relate so much with what Dominic and Lauren said. Even though without having biological kids, when you become an adoptive parent, foster parent, you actually have to mark down, will I take a kid that has this? Would I take a kid that has this? You have to know what your what you can and can't do. And there's grief that comes with what you can and can't do. There just is. And I think that Dominic, I totally cry all the time with stuff my kids do, and go like, pull it together, Mom, pull it together. They don't have any sympathy for what grief I'm, doing already for them. But I think that there is so much, there's so much joy in getting to be a parent. And, you're not going to, no one's going to be a perfect parent. Kids aren't going to be perfect. And so just trying to remove that mindset as much as possible, even though it's hard, is, I think, a really good thing as you go into it.
So that'll lead into the next question, Mimi, for you, because your kids are the oldest. What have you felt the need to talk about CF with them? Or how much do you talk about or deal with that? And how do you approach that conversation? What would that kind of look like? Or what has that looked like for you?
Yeah, I mean, my kids have, my son was born in 2015. So, he's a pre-Trikafta kid. And then my daughter was 2018. And so they've seen me take my pills, do my treatments. They've seen me have days where, I mean, literally this week, I was in the hospital last week for 3 days because 2025 came for me with with a finger infection, for God's sakes. But so, I mean, they've seen highs and lows for sure. And they also, my mom would sometimes bring them up to the hospital, or my husband would. And I have these cute videos of them riding on my IV pole. I mean, it's only cute for CF people, but everyone else is like, it's kind of weird, but it's cute. And but every once in a while, I will like quiz them and be like, do you know what disease mom has? And most of the time they don't. They're like, no, what, you have a disease, mom? And I'm like, say cystic fibrosis. Say it, kids. And I just drill them. I'm like, say it. We're going to know it in this house. And they typically, they forget because they're kids and they care about what's going on in their life. And they care that I'm there for them. And they don't really care that I have a disease at all. Not nearly enough, I think.
So the next one, on a little lighter note, because kids are hilarious and the way they deal with things is quite funny. Laura, do you have any funny stories about kids? I know yours is still a little baby, a little cutie pie, but anything to note?
Yeah, everything she does is hilarious. But that's my opinion. I will say there was a funny moment. It was, I don't know, I want to say like 3-4 weeks after my daughter was born. Here in Texas, we have the newborn screening, which I think is typical across most states at this point. And so, of course, the newborn screening was done, and it showed the one copy of my mutation. We knew this was going to happen. We know she's going to be a carrier, all that good stuff. So I got a call one day from the Department of Health for our state, and the lady was really concerned. She was like, your daughter's newborn screening came back, and unfortunately, it showed one copy of the CF gene. And it's not all encompassing, so we really think you need to go get your daughter tested to make sure she doesn't have another CF gene that maybe isn't tested with newborn screening. Let me give you the information for the local pediatric CF center. Now, we live in the same city that I grew up in. I know the people at the CF center here, the pediatric center. I know them very well. I have their numbers in my phone already. So I told the lady, I said, no, it's okay. I have CF. We knew my daughter would be a carrier. We got my husband tested. We're already in the process of getting my daughter genetic testing and a sweat test just to be sure we're good. But I appreciate, you calling and letting me know. And she was like, oh, well, okay, I guess you're good then. I was like, we're good. And just like, again, it's those little things in those newborn days that just make you crack up laughing. I got off the phone and I just could not stop. I was just like, oh my gosh, it's just another like, oh, hello, CF, how are you? Nice to see you, interrupting my normal life. But anyway, that was a pretty funny story, I think.
Yep, that's a good one. Mimi, do you have any funny stories with your kids?
No funny stories. No, my favorite right now is that my son has a little girl in his class who's diabetic, and I have CF diabetes. We have the same, I use the same pump and CGM as her. And so we always kind of like bond when I go into his classroom. And he was talking to me the other day about her and that she had a low blood sugar or something. And I said, oh, that's so great that you're in her class, though, because, your mom has diabetes. And so you can be there for her. And he just looked at me and goes, I don't know anything about diabetes. I was like, all right, kids gather around. We're going to watch mom put this pump on now. You are going to learn some diabetes things. But they don't. They do. They love me, but they don't want to care for me. And I don't really want them to be my caregivers either. So it's okay.
That's spoken like a true boy mom right there, right? Dominic, do you have any funny stories with your?
I'm sure there are more than I can remember at this moment, but I guess two quick ones. One, last year we were going to Miami for spring break, and he kept saying, going to Miami. My son was 4 at the time, and we get there and, we're going to the beach and doing all this stuff. And my son's like, when are we going to see Dad's Amy? Because I was saying Miami, and he just thought that we were going to see somebody.
Pure Amy.
Yeah. And then the other one was I had a blood sugar crash. I mean, this is not funny, but it ended up being funny. My CGM didn't catch the crash, so I went from like a regular reading of like 120 to 45 in like a matter of minutes. And my wife was at work, and I was making breakfast for my son. And I was like, basically, I couldn't stand up. I had to lay down on the floor, and I dialed 911, and I was trying to tell my son, he was 4 at the time. I was like, there's going to be some police and fire, paramedics coming to the house because Dad doesn't feel good, and don't be scared. Like, if, so I explained the whole thing, and he was so excited that the fire trucks were coming to the house. He basically stepped over my body laying on the ground to see the fire trucks pull up. It was hilarious for him. For me, I was like, uh-oh, this is it. I'm done.
Yeah, kids can be definitely funny about that. My son definitely thinks it's hilarious because my lung transplant was a young guy, and my husband's friends teased him all the time about, oh, your girlfriend has boy parts. Your girlfriend has boy parts because of that, because of the lungs. And they wanted to get a T-shirt made, and my son thinks that's just the funniest thing ever and tells everybody that he can. So it's a wonderful time. So we have some questions from the audience, and one was, which is kind of off topic, but it was for you, Mimi. It was, if you don't mind sharing, what cancers have you had?
Oh, I have had skin cancers so far, just a lot of skin cancer. In fact, I think of all the doctors I go to, I absolutely hate going to dermatology the most because they literally will be like, just put it back on. It's all cancer. Just start chemo on the whole body all the time. So a history of skin cancers in my family, and then with the susceptibility, taking high doses of antibiotics my whole life. I just I have to do the chemo cream on pretty much my whole body, just rotationally. You just pick different zones each year and just do that, and then they just cut other pieces off you, and it's fun. But I think with CF, I'm just always like, the cancers are coming for me. I know they are, but I'm just gonna, as long as possible.
And then another person wants to know, Mimi, if you would share your tour dates, if you could put them in the comments or something.
Absolutely. Yes. Follow me on Instagram. That's where I'm the most active, you guys. And I'm really going to Montana and Idaho in March right now, and building out my schedule for the summer. So if anyone desires to have the comedian come out, I would love it. It would be super fun. I love to make people laugh.
Another question is, what would we have done differently with parenting with CF? Dominic, do you want to take a note, or Lauren, you want to jump in
How
on
do you
that?
mean? I'm not sure I understand.
So if being with CF and parenting, I guess, what would you have done differently? Or is there any regrets, maybe? Things maybe you would have changed?
I probably would have. I mean, it's hard to say this because I needed all the time to be healthy enough, but it would have been nice to have kids younger. Although I was having a great time living in LA in my 20s and 30s, so yeah, I mean, it was hard to do that. I was on transplant list, but now I'm 42 and my son is 5, and I'm like exhausted all the time just trying to keep up with them. And I see all these young dads at T-ball, and they're like running around playing, and so I'm like, so I mean, I guess in an ideal world, maybe do it a little bit earlier, but me personally, I don't really have too many regrets at all.
Lauren, what are yours?
I feel like I'm still so early in the journey. Like I'm just trying to figure out how to do it at all. So come back to me in a couple of years. I think I'll probably have a good answer for you.
Well, I definitely feel Dominic's pain. Mimi, do you feel that about be nice to be younger?
We started. Well, I'm 37. My kid is 10, so it's 27. So I feel
Oh,
like
that's a friend.
I actually feel like I started this journey too early. My husband and I, I think having CF, I've always been in a race to grow up and to prove like that I'm grown up. And so we just did everything like as quick as possible. Graduate college, let's get married, let's have kids, let's buy a house. And we both look at each other now and we're like, we should have traveled more. We should have had more fun. We should have had more partners. What are we doing here? No, we love each other very much. And, but yeah, I don't really, I agree with Dominic. No regrets, just tattoo it, but no regrets spelled wrong, of course. That's CF right there.
That's true. Another question is, as parents now, how are you balancing medical care with also caring for a kid? Who wants to do that one? Lauren?
So I'll hop in. I do a lot of it after she's gone to bed, which probably seems like a cop-out answer, but it's true. Just because like with a toddler, you're just like go, 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 go. Like you're just every second of the day is filled with like either chasing her, keeping her up from like hurting herself, figuring out what snack she wants to eat. Like you're always just something. So a lot of it I take care of after she goes to bed. Like I answer my chart messages, message my team, try to do like the online pill fills, you know, in the evening. And then anything that I can accomplish like in the evening time, I try to just like write down on a sticky and have it in my face. So I do it. But as far as like from a health standpoint, like treatments and all that stuff, again, fortunately with Trikafta, I'm not having to do any of that. So that's not really an issue, but we'd love to hear like from Mimi or Dominic, you guys, if you're still like doing, I guess Dominic, not so much treatments, but like, you know, any other therapies, kind of how you manage that.
Yeah, I'll jump in and just say, yeah, it's a big cop out, Lauren. You can't be doing that after the kids go to bed. How dare you? How dare you? No, I do try to take care of myself like first and be visible about it, and that's hopefully to teach my kids to take time to care for themselves too. I grew up with a mom that gave everything to her kids and to my CF, and that that was not necessarily like wasn't helpful for me too, to realize like I needed to give myself more time to take care of myself. And but when I've done it the other way, like just pretended that I don't have CF needs, I always end up being sick. I just always, and then it's a bigger pain in the butt, right? And so my husband's a really incredible partner though too, and they're all actually really quite wonderful. When I'm really sick, my kids are just like, oh, I'll get that for your mom, or you know, my husband will do something. When I'm doing well though, they suck. You know, they're like, go do it, mom, go. You don't have anything that's holding you back, which is really a good mindset actually to have. So pills, treatments, doctors, appointments, it is all really normal mom stuff to them. I think they're going to be quite shocked when they find out other parents don't go to the hospital as much as their mom and don't have a whole pill cabinet section in every room of the house and things like that, you know. Also my son, I don't do the vest or anything anymore, but when I still have them, but when I was younger, when my son was younger, he would always like put on the vest or like lay on it and be really funny and cute in it. I love that. What about you, Dominic?
I think
Oh, go ahead.
I was told not to read the comments, and I did, and now I forgot what the question was. Yeah. So I try to be really good about scheduling my appointments when my son's at preschool. So I try not to interrupt, the daily flow of life. And then when I need to, when it's absolutely necessary, we moved from LA back to Massachusetts so we could be near my parents and my wife's parents. And so they take my son. I was in the hospital for 4 days last year. And so they, when my wife's at work, they took him for the for the day or whatever. And so we do our best to try to be prepared with coverage for him when there's unforeseen circumstances. But when I can control it, I try to do it around his schedule so I can be there, because I work from home, and so I pick him up from school and stuff. So I drop him off from school, run to my appointments, be back in time to get him most of the time. So that's kind of how it works.
And I think we got one more question that we can answer from the audience was, young kids get sick a lot. How does that impact you? And do you take any precautions when you get sick? And Dominic, I think this is right up your alley right now.
Apparently I don't take any precautions because I got slammed. No, but it was funny because I was literally just talking to my wife about how I was like, oh, I've gone a really long time without being sick. And my son's been sick a few times in between that. When he is sick, I usually wear a mask, or we have a finished basement, so I'll sleep downstairs, and I try to like politely stay away from him as much as possible. But obviously, when I'm his caretaker during the day, I have to be around him, so I'll wear a mask, or Lysol or bleach the kitchen and bathroom after, like twice a day after he's been sick. And I get all my flu shots and all that stuff. So I've been pretty good about this, but this time I got it pretty hard. So
But you jinxed yourself. That's what happened, unfortunately. Lauren, Mimi, do you have anything to add to that?
Do your best. I mean, it's going to happen, unfortunately. But we're all prepared for illness, I feel like we had a cold last week, and I was like, oh, I know what to do. Throw the CF protocols in there. You just do the best you can. Accept it's going to happen, but do the best you can.
Yeah, I think the acceptance piece of you're going to get sick. Also, use shame for your kids. You see them wipe their hand on a public, you go, gross, don't do that. Stop it. Mom doesn't want to get sick, and I don't want you sick either. But and just the realization that their germs are different than your germs. It's okay. I think there's a lot of fear in general, but yeah, for good reasons.
Okay, sounds good. Well, thank you. We're just out of time. Sorry, so I want to wrap it up. I want to thank all of our speakers for sharing their knowledge, insight about our paths to parenthood. Thank everyone for participation, and we had some great questions. Before you go, please fill out our satisfaction question under the poll tab on the right side of your screen. And thank you so much for attending. We will see you hopefully at all the next sessions, and we hope you have a wonderful time at BreatheCon. We appreciate very much everything that you've contributed to with this session. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thanks, guys. Bye.